Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Tanya. We're going to delve into chapter 50 this evening. And the theme of chapter 50, or its essence, is the soul of music. And we're going to see the connection between singing and out-of-body experiences. Music is something that has always been connected to spirituality. If you look at the history of music, the earliest forms of music were all devotional, spiritual songs towards God or the gods. That's how music began. And even today, when many people would not necessarily associate music with spirituality, but it does have a spiritual power to it. We are transported by music. We're taken somewhere else. When you listen to music, when you experience it fully, so it takes you out of the here and now and brings you to a different place, to a deeper place. And so the power and the spirituality of music is one that's very much worth exploring. And this is something that comes up seemingly quite incidentally in chapter 50, in the midst of a discussion on the topic of love. That Rabbi Zalman, the author of Tanya, has been discussing over the last few chapters various levels of love of God, of ways of connecting to the divine. And in chapter 50, he introduces a new level of love of God. And in the midst of that discussion, he brings in the power of music to arouse this love and this connection, and how music is coming from the soul and impacts the soul. But to get there, we're going to first explore an interesting question, which Rabbi Zalman will answer in this chapter. And this question is based on a Talmudic saying. In the Talmud, the great compendium of Jewish wisdom, it says, "Against your will you live, and against your will you die." This is a quote from the Ethics of the Fathers, a section of the Talmud talking about ethics. And it says, "Against your will you live, against your will you die." Without any further commentary. It's just one of the sayings. The Ethics of the Fathers is a gathering of little aphorisms of the great sages, things to live by. It would be the equivalent to the modern day, well, not so modern day calendars. When we used to have calendars, the actual page calendars, and on the bottom of each day there was a little quote for the day. So that doesn't exist anymore. But the Ethics of the Fathers is like a quotes for living. And one such quote is, "Against your will you live, against your will you die." Meaning, how would we interpret this statement, this saying? How would we understand what is the wisdom behind this? What are we being told here? Can anyone suggest an explanation for this saying? Against your will you live, against your will you die. What are we being told here?
You don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice. Either way. That you weren't... Yeah. What is not in your power?
To live or to die.
That to live or to die, to come into the world, to leave this world, it's not our choice, it's not in our power, this is not something that we create, it's thrust upon us. Life was given to us, we didn't take it, we didn't choose it, we didn't choose to come into the world, and we don't choose to leave the world. When our time comes, that's when we go. Life and death are not really in our hands. We didn't choose to live, we don't choose to die, we are brought into the world and taken out of it. Okay, and why do we need to know this, or did we not know this already, or what is it giving us? What insight is this giving us? How is this helping our life to know this?
It's all in the hands of heaven, you have no control.
You have no control.
Man plans and loves.
So, is that saying everything in between is also against our will? In between life and death, or?
Does it not mean that when our soul comes, when we are born, our soul doesn't want to come down because it knows that it's a very difficult journey.
Mm-hmm.
And when we die, the soul, on the other hand, towards the end of our lives, we usually realize that can actually make a difference, even just to ourselves. But then we don't have a choice either. So this indeed reminds us that life is a transformative experience.
Mm-hmm. So originally,
we didn't want to come down because it's difficult and it's challenging. In the end, we realized that there are benefits, but it's too late already.
mm-hmm.
So this reminds us to keep a perspective on things.
Right. So in other words, there's a certain irony in this statement. It's saying against your will you live, against your will you die. Meaning that you didn't want to be born. Against your will doesn't just mean that you didn't choose it. Against your will means you didn't want it. It's not saying without asking you were born. It's saying it's against your will. You didn't want to be born, and against your will you die. You don't want to leave either. Yeah, but it's a bit of another story. The idea that it's against your will. Well, one second. Were we born against our will? Hang on a minute. When did our will begin? Before we were born? Yeah? How? The soul. We have a soul. Before we're born, we have a soul. Birth is the soul entering the body. Before that, you're a soul. And the soul doesn't want to come down, doesn't want to come into this world. Because the soul, before it enters this world, is in a spiritual realm, a realm of peace, of tranquility, of no problems, no issues, none of the headaches that we have down here. And so the soul has no interest in coming down into this world. So birth is against your will. Your soul is thrust into a body, plunged down into this world. If it were asked, it would say, no thanks. What would I need this for? Why would I need to come down into this world of challenge, of difficulty, of sorrow, of pain? The soul has no appreciation for coming down into this world, no reason to come here. And so it is reluctant. It didn't want to come in. Which is perhaps why we cry when we're born. One reason. We look around and say, how did I get here? I didn't ask for this. So against your will you live, but then against your will you die. After spending a bit of time down here, you don't want to leave. What changed? If you didn't want to come down, why aren't you relieved to leave? So you could say on a simplistic level, you get used to life down here. Not only that, you sort of forget where you came from as well. The soul comes down into this world, and from our conscious mind, we don't have any memory from before we were born. We don't remember what the soul world was before we came down into this world. So therefore, this is all we know. And so, while at the beginning of your life, entering into the world was going into the unknown, at the end of your life, it's the opposite. Leaving this world is going into the unknown because you've forgotten where you came from, and so you don't want to leave. Each time we cross that abyss, it's against our will. We didn't want to enter this world of the unknown. We don't want to leave this world to go back to what is now unknown because we've forgotten where we came from. And so in a way, birth is exactly like death. It's leaving one existence to another, leaving what's familiar to an unfamiliar world. So we didn't want to come down, now we don't want to leave because we got used to where we are. You could say it on that level. Or on a deeper level, you could say that after coming down into this world, even our soul, the deepest levels of our soul, even those levels that are aware of the higher realms, the part of our soul that does know where we came from, that is aware of the higher reality that preceded our birth, even on that level, our soul does not want to leave after it's come into this world. Because there's something about this world that you can't get anywhere else. With all of its difficulties and all of its darkness, that makes this world the world of meaning. It's only while we inhabit a body in this lifetime, in this world, that we can actually achieve something. We can do good. We can overcome evil. We can make choices. We can achieve something real. A soul in heaven is at peace, but it's not achieving. It's a soul in a body down here in this world that can actually impact, do good, change, make something happen. And so before we came into this world and after we leave this world, it's finished. It's only in the short time that we're in this world that we can actually make a difference. And the soul appreciates that once it's come down here into this world. It realizes the preciousness of life in this world and doesn't want to leave. So you didn't want to come down, but then you came down and you don't want to leave. And there are many other ways we could interpret this. There's a lot of depth in this statement. Against your will you live, against your will you die. What Rabbi Shneur Zalman in this chapter of Tanya is going to bring out of this is a new depth into this saying from our sages. Because if we look at it carefully, it seems to be a statement in the present tense. If we were designing this statement based on the way we understood it so far, it should say, against your will you were born, you came to life, and against your will you will die. Assuming somebody's studying this, that means they've been born and they're yet to die. They're somewhere in between. So birth is in their past, death is in the future still. So that's when we're talking and having this conversation. So against your will you live, well, I did. I came into the world against my will. Against your will you die, well, you don't die, you're going to die. Like it's going to happen, but it's not happening. Both statements seem to be in the present tense, as if it's describing you simultaneously living and dying, and both are against your will. It seems to be saying, right now, you don't want to live, and you don't want to die. Which makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. If we separate the two and say, you didn't want to come down at the beginning of your life, you don't want to leave at the end of your life, okay, we understand there was a shift in between. There was a point where you changed your mind, where your soul had a different view of things. At first it was happy in heaven. Now, having come into this world, it appreciates this world is very special, it doesn't want to leave. But the simple reading of it seems to be talking in the present tense. Right now, against your soul you live, against your will you live, against your will you die. That right now you don't want to live and you don't want to die. Which is itself difficult to understand. What does that mean? And how is that true? And however we explain it, how can they both be true at the same time? What do you want? If you're living against your will, that means you want to die. But if you die against your will, that means you want to live. So what do you want already? So to understand this, we're going to explore a deeper explanation to this teaching of our sages that will come out of chapter 50 in Tanya. Let's delve into the text. Rabbi Shneur Zalman begins the chapter saying that there's a form of love that excels all others, as gold is superior to silver, and this is a love like fire. What he's saying briefly is that in the various forms of love, of emotion of love that there is in the human heart, there are different forms of it. Some of them he's described in previous chapters, specifically speaking about the love that we can have for the divine, for God, a yearning for God. He's now describing a different level of love. This love can be found in human relationships and in our love towards God. And this is a superior form of love, a higher level of love. Superior, like gold is superior to silver. He specifically uses those words because Kabbalistically there's love that's gold love and love that's silver love. The word silver in Hebrew is kesef, which actually the word kesef can also be translated as desire and love. So there's a kesef love, but that's silver. Then there's a golden love, which is a deeper form of love. And this, he says, is a love like fire. Just like the redness of gold, the gold also has a fiery look. There is a fiery type of love. He is contrasting this to a water type of love. Kabbalistically, there's a love that's compared to water, and a love that's compared to fire. Water is calm, is cool, is steady. Fire is energetic, powerful, and on the move, all-consuming. There's a love that is calm and cool, like water, and there's a love that is fiery and all-consuming, like fire. Generally speaking, Rabbi Shnei Zalman in other writings says that the love like water would be a brotherly, sisterly type of love. The love that you have for a sibling. Love like fire would be a husband and wife type of love. That a brother-sister love is a constant type of love. One loves one's sibling in a way that is calm. It's not a passionate love. People don't write poetry about the love between brothers and sisters. I mean, maybe there are some poems here and there, but it's not really the subject of poetry, of love songs. It's not that type of energetic love. Brothers and sisters miss each other, but can live apart. It's not the same level of passion. Whereas a husband and wife, the husband-wife love, the romantic love, that's a fiery, passionate love. That's not cool and calm like water. That's fiery like a fire, which is that it's energetic and powerful. A husband and wife can't be apart. It's painful to be apart. That is the subject of love songs and poetry. It's also volatile. It's not nearly as dependable as a brother and sister. You can have a fight with your brother and sister, and you're still brother and sister. Even after years, you're still brother and sister. Whereas husband and wife, it's a volatile relationship. It's fiery. It's energetic. It can burn. It has to be tended to. You have to be careful with it. It's a much more energetic type of love. And so, it's risky, it's more dangerous, but it's far more profound and a fuller experience. That's the love like fire. This form of love excels the others. It's like gold compared to silver. It's a greater, finer, deeper experience. And it's this love that we're going to describe in this chapter. The love like fire. What does it mean like fire? What are the elements of fire that can be expressed in love? So Rabbi Shnei Zalman continues. This is when through contemplation on the greatness of the Infinite One, before whom everything is truly as naught, the soul is kindled and flares up towards the glory of the splendor of his greatness, in order to gaze on the glory of the King, like glowing coals of a mighty flame which surges upwards, striving to be parted from the wick and the wood on which it has taken hold. The nature of fire, and one of the fascinations of fire, is its movement. You watch a fire, it's always flickering upwards, whether it's a small candle like a Shabbos candle or a massive bonfire. When you watch a fire, it's always got this upward surge, that it is flying upwards, the opposite to water. Water will always flow downwards with gravity, it'll always go downwards, whereas a fire always surges upwards. And the Kabbalists describe the fire as having a yearning to jump off whatever is holding it down. It's always trying to get away, to fly away. So when you watch a flickering candle, it's the candle almost has this will to leap off the wick and lose itself in the ether. The fire is always pulling itself upwards and off, like it wants to jump away. This fire can be expressed in our soul as well. When a person meditates deeply on the oneness of God, on the infinity of God, before whom everything is naught, in front of him there is nothing else. When you truly lose yourself in that meditation, then the desire will be to leap off what's holding you down and to lose yourself in that reality. Which means to leave the body and for the soul to just lose itself in God. This is the ultimate spiritual yearning of our soul, to get out of the body and to lose itself in God. In this statement, Rabbi Shnei Zalman, at chapter 50 of a book of 53 chapters, is revealing to us what the end result is if you really follow these instructions. If you really go by what he's teaching, this is what's going to happen. In the world of spirituality, we need to know what is the end goal. What's going to happen if we're successful in this? What will happen if we follow this path? Rabbi Shnei Zalman is saying that in true spirituality, what will happen when you connect to it, when you get a real sense of God's presence, you're not going to want anything else. nothing else will be interesting. Nothing else will fulfill your yearning. You'll want to lose yourself in it totally. This is the experience of the soul wanting to leave the body, because the body is what blocks us from that truth. The body is what distracts us from the divine reality. And so when you get that, when you realize this, when you contemplate deeply on the truth, and that is that God is the true reality and nothing else really exists outside of him, so then when that becomes real to you, when that idea hits home, then what are you chasing? What else do you want? What else is there to desire but God? And so therefore, what's stopping you? What's blocking you? What is between you and God? Your body. Your physical body that with your physical eyes only sees the physical world, and with your physical heart desires the physical things, and you have all these urges and needs of this world. That's what's blocking you from truth, from reality, from God. You lose total interest in that, and your soul wants to leave the body. This sounds a bit worrying. If you're a sane person, this sounds like a very worrying state to be in. To be in a state where you actually want to leave the body, you have no interest in this world, you only want God. If somebody you cared about told you that this is where they're at, if they said, I've been going to this Tanya class, been following it very closely, and got all these meditations on God and oneness and truth and the higher levels of the soul, and it's clicked for me, and now I've reached chapter 50, so I actually feel like I want to leave this world. I just want to be a part of God, because nothing else is true. Until now, I was chasing after my career and relationships and building a house, and I had all this stuff going on in my life, and spirituality was one of those things. But now I've really got into it. I realized there's nothing else but God, which is one of the central themes of the book of Tanya, that one God doesn't mean there's one God and not many gods. One God means just God. There's nothing else but God. He's the one. He's all that really exists. That's the truth. And if you really get this, so then your conclusion is, well, then nothing else is truth. Nothing else really exists but God. So then there's nothing else to be interested in but God. So your soul wants to leave the body and the trappings of the body and everything in this world and just lose itself in God. That's what it wants. This sounds a concerning state to be in. And yet, Rabbi Zalman has introduced this as being the highest level of love. This is the pinnacle. This is what we really are aiming for. A love of God like fire. Just like the fire wants to leave its bodily limitation, which is the wick or the wood or whatever it's holding it down. Just like the fire is always trying to jump off that. Our soul, when it feels this love, wants to just jump out of the body. This is good. This is something we should be yearning for. We better check this out. We better understand how good this is, how safe this idea is. And just by the way, Rabbi Zalman, when he describes these spiritual emotions, this is not something he read somewhere. This is something he did. All of these levels that he describes of love and this feeling of yearning for the soul to leave the body, he experienced it, and he's sharing with us his experience. So we are reading his words and trying to figure out, he did this. So is he advising us that this is what we should be doing? So far, that's what it seems. Let's see further how he describes this experience. This, he says, is an expression of the element of fire that is in the divine soul. We spoke earlier that the four elements that are air, water, earth, and fire. These four elements are described as being the building blocks of the physical world, but also of the spiritual world. Every reality has these four elements in it, even the spiritual world. Our soul is made up of an air element, a water element, a fire element, and an earth element. The air element is the most spiritual. and abstract part of our soul. The earth element is the most physical and down-to-earth level of our soul. And then there's the fire and the water, which, as we described, the water being the calmness and the fire being the energetic yearning of our soul. And here, what we're describing here is tapping into the fire element of our soul. In other words, our soul naturally has this yearning to go upwards. Not to be earthly, but to be otherworldly, to get out of here. This is the fire element of our soul. And when you tap into this and you feel it, as a result of tapping into the fire element of your soul, the soul develops a thirst. Like when you're in the heat, you get thirsty. The heat of this soul, it develops a yearning, a thirst for God. This thirst then leads to the next level. Next, it attains the level of love sickness, which is when, what is love sickness? When you're in love and the love is not being fulfilled. You feel love sick. So you have this yearning to be close to God in this case. That yearning is being blocked by your body. You get love sick. There's this yearning that becomes so deep to the point where you're missing something. You're not fully well on a spiritual level. You're sick with love. And then it reaches a state known as ecstasy of the soul, which is where the soul releases itself from the body and goes to a higher level. Now again, we're just reading these words. Rabbi Shneur Zalman had this. It is now trying to describe an experience that he had. That when he felt the divine fire in his soul, it leads to a thirst, which leads to a love sickness, which then is fulfilled in a state of ecstasy of the soul, where the soul actually connects, communes, becomes one with God, and on some level transcends the body. Now, I've translated it as ecstasy of the soul. The term he uses is kolot hanefesh, which kolot hanefesh could really be translated as expiry of the soul. Kolot hanefesh means that the soul is lost. It actually loses itself in godliness. And this is a level that Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying is the direct result of the fire, the love in our soul. He was known, Rabbi Shneur Zalman was known to lose himself at certain points. Sometimes he would be praying, and in the midst of his prayer, he would collapse on the floor in some state of spiritual ecstasy, to the point where his family organized that around the area where he prayed, they put pillows everywhere so he wouldn't hurt himself. Because he would be totally unaware when he'd go into a state of prayer, at this spiritual rapture, he would roll on the ground. He would fall over. Once he went missing. No one knew where he was. And they found him eventually in the midst of a forest, still praying, and he was holding in his hand a piece of wood. And when they looked at it, they saw that it was the top of a prayer bench like that. The top part of it that he had somehow disconnected from the bottom in the midst of his prayer, and he was still holding it in the middle of the forest. How he got there, how he ended up there, no one knew. He was in a total state of beyond the physical in his prayers. And so he's firsthand telling us that you can get to a state where you're not really in this world, where the closeness you feel to God is so much that it takes you beyond this world. They say about the Baal Shem Tov, who was the teacher of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, that he once met a great physician, and he asked this physician, to examine him to see how his health is. And the physician said that you seem healthy, but he said that in examining you, there's something wrong in your pulse. There's something a little bit abnormal in your pulse, but I can't detect what it's from, where it is. It's not It's not something that I've ever seen before. And the Baal Shem Tov said, it's love sickness. But it's a spiritual love sickness. And so it wouldn't be in your textbooks. You wouldn't find it anywhere else. That it actually impacted his pulse, the way his heart beat in his yearning and love for God. These people had an issue with inhabiting the body. It was a challenge for them. It was difficult for them. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman is here suggesting that we should also try this at home. That this is for you as well. To feel the fire in your soul that yearns to be one with God and yearns to be beyond the body, to get out of here, to experience ecstasy of the soul. This seems very beyond us to attain, very unrealistic, and also, how will this be good? How will this be helpful for us? Why would this be a good thing to experience? We don't know yet. This is a picture of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur. This is Rabbi Menachem Mendel. He was the great grandson of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the author of the Tanya. And this picture is of him in the midst of giving what's called a mimer, a Hasidic discourse. Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the Rebbe, would publicly at gatherings speak, sometimes for hours on end, expounding Torah thoughts. But in the midst of those talks, there was a different type of talk that he would give, called a mimer, which is a very intense, deep revelation of divine wisdom. It wasn't a talk conversational like I'm talking to you now. It was where he would go into a bit of a trance state, and he would be seemingly connecting to something higher and giving over wisdom. He became like a conduit, where it was almost like words were coming out of his mouth on their own. He would usually have his eyes closed, like you see here, and be in a state of intense concentration. And during the course of that talk, everyone present would be upstanding, and he would speak. Some of them would go for 20 minutes, some of them could go for longer. And the wisdom that flowed out of him at this time was on a totally different plane. It was noticeable on his face. Sometimes even a few minutes before he would start one of these discourses, that his face turned a different color, more pale, and he would get into a very deep concentrative state, a contemplative and focused state. And during the speaking as well, he would speak in a certain tune, not a conversational type of tune, like a bit of a sing-song tune that he would speak in, that indicated he was speaking from a different place. Not only that, but sometimes after giving these talks, he would request a transcript of the talk to be given to him. And it seemed from the people around him that he was seeing it for the first time. Like he was hearing the ideas that he had said for the first time, almost as if he wasn't aware of them when he said it. It was a completely different way of communication. And so those observing it surmise that he is in some type of state of divine ecstasy here, where his soul is a notch higher than his body, and the body is being used as a conduit, but he's not fully there. Something that was noted that you can't see in the picture, but you can see sort of, is his hands. You can't see his hands. His hands are actually beneath a tablecloth, under the table there. And he would always, during the discourse, keep his hands under the table. And what was going on at that time, this big table here, in amongst the community of his disciples and Hasidim, some of the little kids would climb under the table. Like this gathering would be going on for hours and hours and hours, and the kids don't really know what's going on, so they had to do their thing. So they would be climbing under the tables. But something that the kids observed was that whenever the Rebbe was saying a mimer, would have a handkerchief that was sort of woven between his fingers that he was holding tightly. Only at this time, only when he was saying a maimer, he would be holding this handkerchief. And again, not that it was ever explained why, but it was surmised by his disciples that this was him holding on to this world, holding on to the physical world. Something concrete had to be in his hand that he was holding on to sort of keep him down here. Because at the time his soul was rising upwards at the time of these discourses, and so he had to hold on down here. Even stranger was at a certain point, after the Rebbe had had a serious heart attack in the late 70s, so his doctors had told him that he cannot do these public talks for a while, he needs to rest. But he insisted that if he doesn't do that, he can't get better, because his whole reason for being is to give over and to teach, and if he's not doing that, he can't possibly get better. So eventually they gave him permission to do public talks, but he did it while hooked up to a heart monitor, so the doctor could watch very carefully, make sure that he's not getting too overexcited. And they say that when they watched that heart monitor, when he said a maimer, so the monitor went extremely calm, like a different type of level of blips when he was saying the maimer. That he was in a different state, even physically somehow. So there is the ability, the human being has the ability to, at the one hand, be in this world, at the same time be beyond this world. To the soul to reach a level where its connectedness to God is where it's a step above the body, a level of connectedness where we're not limited to the body on some level. What's interesting is that whenever the Rebbe would say such a discourse, a maimer, it would always be introduced beforehand by a nigun, a wordless melody that was sung by the entire crowd. And there were specific nigunim, specific melodies that were sung beforehand. And there were melodies that were sung after the end of it as well. Excuse me. The melody beforehand would be one of yearning and an upward type of flow. And the melody afterwards would be a downward, coming back down to earth flow. And this was a very important part of it. You wouldn't have a maimer without the nigun. You can't have this discourse without first the introductory song. The song had to introduce it, had to put things into the right mode. And you could see the Rebbe during those songs in a very intense state. And it was clear that the music itself, the music was transporting, was a part of the meditation to get into that state. And this is what Rabbi Shnei Zalman describes now, the power of music to help us get into this state. It is from this level of connectedness, that the souls of the Levites are rooted. The Levites are a tribe amongst the 12 tribes of Israel, but the Levites specifically had the job of singing and playing music in the temple. The service, he says, the service of the Levites was to raise the voice in melodic thanksgiving with song and music, with tunefulness and harmony, in a manner of advance and retreat, which we'll describe in a minute, which is the distinction of the intense love resembling the flame that flashes out of the lightning. The wording here that Rabbi Shnei Zalman uses is quite opaque. He's describing something that he will soon say cannot really be described. But he says that the Levites in the temple, their job was to bring music to the temple. That as a part of the sacrificial service, the events that were going on in the temple, music was a very important part of it. And so you had a tribe, the Levite tribe, whose job it was to sing and to play instruments in the temple to accompany the spiritual service there. Says Rabbi Shnei Zalman, what this singing was doing, the tunes, the harmonies, the melodies of the music, it was to create this ability of the soul to lift upwards and then to come back down. He says in a manner of advance and retreat. Advance and retreat in Hebrew, ratzov v'shov, means to fly upwards and then retreat back. To flicker upwards out of the body, but then to return back down into the body. The ups and downs of the music reflected the ups and downs of the soul's movement. And when the music leads upwards, it's drawing the soul upwards and out of the body. When the music came back down, it brought the soul back down into the body. Advance and retreat, or rushing and returning. In Hasidic music, and this can be said of many other forms of music as well, but certainly in Hasidic music, when you listen to Hasidic tunes, there's a certain pattern that many of them have. There is what's often described as a question and an answer. Just like in study, when you're studying a topic, you read something, you question it, and then you answer it to resolve it. Or just like in a thriller or a novel, you have a storyline, characters, and then there's some conflict, there's an issue, there's a problem that is in the end resolved, and everything sorts itself out. In music as well, spiritual music has a question and an answer. It has a part of it that leads you upwards and leaves you dangling, and then there's a part that brings you back down and resolves the issue. And when listening to this music, you go on a bit of a journey where there's notes that lead you up somewhere, and then there's notes that bring you back down, and it's resolved. After listening to music all our lives, there's a certain expectation we have of a song. We sort of know what's coming next, even if we've never heard the song before, because there's a certain shape that a song has, where it leads you to a certain place, and then it goes back, which brings us back to do. You have to get back to do. You start with do, but you've got to get back to do. And if you didn't get back to do, the song hasn't finished. You're left in this uncomfortable space. It's got to resolve itself, the song. And so it's interesting because we usually would think of music and creating music as being something that is purely imaginative and creative, and if I'm writing music, so there's not rules to it, you just make your own music. But there are very specific rules to music. For music to work, for a piece of music to actually sit right, it has to fit into certain rules. There's got to be the rush and return, the advance and the retreat, the question and the answer. There are, it should be noted, certain tunes, particularly in the Hasidic tradition, that don't have this. There are tunes that have a question and have no answer to them. There's one particular tune, it's called the Beinani. And the Beinani, the word Beinani means the struggler, which is a great theme of the book of Tanya. It means a person who struggles, tries to do the right thing, tries to be good, but never becomes purely righteous, never becomes totally holy, always has inner struggles, never gets over it, never graduates from the inner struggles of being a good person, is always fighting to be a good person and doing their best, but never gets over that struggle, which Tanya says is our job, all of our job, because none of us are going to ever get there. We just are here to struggle. There's a song called the Beinani which has question and doesn't have an answer. It's not resolved. It leaves you feeling that uncomfortable feeling of a struggle, because that's what the song is about. It's not about the neat life that with a happy ending. It's the life of struggle. There are some songs like that, but most of them will take you up and then come down. And within each song, there are ups and downs. The ups and downs of the music are a reflection of the ups and downs of the soul wanting to go upwards and then coming back down. And so Rabbi Shneur Zalman here is saying that the Levites, the music that accompanied the temple service, was to try and bring the listener to a state where their soul went upwards with this fire, but then came back down and resettled in the body. Yearned to leave the body, but then came back down into the body. This was the flame created through the music of the Levites. He says about this, it is impossible to elucidate this matter clearly in writing. I can't really explain it, he says. Yet every warm-hearted and intelligent person gifted with understanding, who deeply binds his mind and contemplation to God, will discover the goodness and light which are treasured up in his intelligent soul, each according to his capacity. Meaning, he says, I can't explain it anymore. I can't put any more words to this. This is something you just have to experience. And any warm-hearted and intelligent person will feel it, will get what I'm saying, that the power of music is to take you up and then to bring you back down, to lose yourself in it and to yearn higher, but then to somehow come back down into this world. But I can't explain it anymore, he says. I can't put it into writing any better than this. So to try, if it can't be explained anymore, maybe through a story we'll be able to get a better sense of what he means. This is a story of another Rabbi, Rabbi Yisrael Taub of Modjitz, who lived about 100 years ago. He was a musically gifted person, and he authored many beautiful songs in the Hasidic tradition, very complicated, beautiful pieces. Recently, the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra put together a concert of his music with the full orchestra, and it's beautiful, beautiful stuff. Very, very powerful, very majestic music, but not easy to play or to sing. Complicated stuff. And so they say about Rabbi Yisrael that he wasn't very healthy. He had diabetes, and it was causing problems in his feet. And so he was sent to Carlsbad. Carlsbad in Europe was a resort town where he was told if he goes there and goes for walks and goes to the natural baths, it might help his feet and prevent further problems. So while he was there in Carlsbad, he was walking around and seeing this beautiful, beautiful resort city, and he was taken by its beauty. And he started thinking about Jerusalem. Jerusalem, particularly in the early 1900s, was desolate, was forlorn, was a lost city, was grown over, filled with poverty, and it made him think of one of the prayers that we say on Yom Kippur late in the afternoon. Towards the end of Yom Kippur, there's a prayer where we say that I remember and I moan when I see that all the other cities of the world are beautiful and established and safe, and our city, the city of Jerusalem, is desolate and left in the pit. And so I'm brokenhearted about that. And the Jewish people, our city and our home is so desolate, where all the other cities seem fine. But nevertheless, even though this has happened to us, even though we've been exiled from our land, but still we're faithful to God. We still pray to you, even after all that's happened to us. He thought of this, and he started singing a tune to these words from the Yom Kippur prayers. And it was a beautiful tune. And when he came back from Carlsbad, he said to his family, I brought you back a gift from Carlsbad, a song. And he sang them the song. And it was a beautiful song. But he said that this song is not complete. It needs more work. And over the next couple of years, he kept trying to go back to this song to perfect it. But he said that Satan was stopping it from happening. There was some blockage from letting this song come out into the world. It wasn't right yet. And somebody who is creative will understand that you can't just sit and write a song just when you decide to write a song. It has to come. It has to fall. It has to land. And it wasn't landing. And he felt there was a blockage. This song, the world's not ready for it yet. There's some blockage for this song. Anyway, in the meantime, his feet got worse, and he developed gangrene in one of his feet, and it looked like he was going to have to possibly amputate one of his legs. He was in a huge amount of pain, and it was decided that he has to go to Berlin where they have more advanced medical services there. And in Berlin, they're going to look at his leg and see what the story is. This was about the year 1913. And he arrived in Berlin. He went to see a doctor. His name was Dr. Israel. Even back then, the Jewish doctors were the majority. So this Dr. Israel looked at his leg and said, we have to amputate. Like, there's nothing we can do for your leg. We must amputate, and we have to do it immediately. But there's a problem. The problem is that your heart will not be strong enough to handle an anesthetic. If we anesthetize you and put you to sleep, I don't think you're going to wake up. So we've got a little issue here. To leave the gangrene and to not amputate your leg, it's going to spread and cause big problems. But to amputate your leg, we can only do that, but we can't give you an anesthetic because you're not going to survive that. So what do we do? That's a tough choice. So Rabbi Taub said, let's do the operation without anesthetic. I'm going to start singing. And when I get into the song, you can start cutting. And so I don't know if he had to sign some type of waiver or how it worked back then, but the doctor said, okay, I mean, there's not much choice. To leave it, it's not going to be good either. We can't give you the anesthetic. But the rabbi said, no problem. So he lay down and he started singing. And he got fully into his song, and they started cutting. And the operation went, not a brief operation, not a simple one. And the entire time he was singing his nigun, singing his tune. They say that Dr. Israel, in the midst of this, was a little bit freaked out at seeing somebody singing beautifully while his leg is being amputated, to the point where at one point he went into another ward where there was a government official who had some disease and was complaining and moaning, and he said to this government official, do you know there's a rabbi in the other room who his leg has been cut off without anesthetic and he's singing, and all you can do is moan. But this was a rather extraordinary case. Anyway, he kept singing throughout the entire time. At one point, he looked out of the hospital window and he saw a view of Berlin. And he was again reminded of his song about Jerusalem. That, here in Berlin, a big built-up city, and Jerusalem's in ruins. And so he went back and he revisited that song. And he started an extended version of it. And now it flowed. And so he sang this most beautiful song. And he explained that what was going on at this moment was that he could have experienced the physical pain that he was going through. But through the music, he lifted himself to a place where he transferred that pain to the pain of the divine presence in exile, the pain of Jerusalem in mourning. It wasn't him anymore. He was in a higher place. And so therefore he was not aware of the physical pain. He was above it, he was beyond it. And so the song transported him there, to that place where he was not so much in his body anymore. He was completely enveloped in the music. Now, this again, I'm not suggesting we should try. I don't think we should test this one out for ourselves. We can take the anesthetic if we need it. But on some level, we can emulate such a thing, that the power of a deep tune can actually take us to somewhere higher. The song, the music, is the song of the soul. It's the movement of the soul, the up and down of the soul. And when we get enveloped in that, it can actually take us a little bit out of the bodily world. But what's fascinating about this one is that to be taken out of the body is one thing, but how did he get back? How did he return down? If the music was taking him upwards, how did he get back into the body and not leave the body? How did he not die? It must be that the music had what we described earlier as the rush and return, the upward and the down, the question and the answer, the upward yearning, and then the coming back down to earth. The yearning to go up, but the coming back down. And that's the trick. How do you have a spiritual yearning to go up and then respond to that with coming back down to earth? This is the big question that all spiritualities have to answer. It's one thing to yearn for something higher, but how does that help the here and now? It's one thing to be all spiritual, but how does that help the physical world? How does that keep us down here? What benefit is there to this world from spiritual yearning, from spiritual seeking, from meditation and other worlds? This Rabbi Yisrael Taub answered in his music, the up and the down of the music. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman answers it in words. He puts it in words. Have a look at this idea. Thus it is written in Sefer Yetzirah, which is a book of Kabbalah, very early Kabbalistic work. And if your heart rushes, return to the one. The Sefer Yetzirah, this Kabbalistic work, again gives very, very brief and opaque statements. If your heart rushes, return to the one. What does that mean? The interpretation of if your heart rushes is the craving of the soul. When it bursts into flame and grows so exceedingly enraptured that the very soul is consumed with a desire to pour itself out into the embrace of its source, the life of all life, and to leave its confinement in the physical body in order to attach itself to him. Meaning, if your heart rushes means when you feel a feeling, a state of spiritual rapture, of uplift, of yearning, of height, of wanting to go beyond this world, when you feel any spiritual uplift, the flame, the fire reaching upwards, if you ever experience this, if you ever get there, if you ever have a moment of spiritual clarity, of yearning, then one must take to heart the teaching of the sages. You live against your will in this body, animating it for the purpose of drawing downwards the higher life from the blessed life of life, through the life-giving Torah, that there may be a dwelling in the lower world for his blessed oneness in a revealed state. Meaning, if you ever feel a closeness to God, if you ever feel this spiritual rapture, if you ever feel this fire, this yearning, this upward surge, so then at that moment you need to remember, what does God want from you? If you're close to God, then you have to hear the voice of God saying, what does he wants from you? And that is to be in a body and to make this world holy. That's the divine purpose. That's what God wants from you. That's what you live against your will means. God wants you down here. You may not want to be down here, but that's where God wants you to be. Your soul may have a natural yearning to leave this world, but what God wants from you is to be in this world. So anytime you feel a spiritual closeness, a spiritual yearning, a high spirituality, that should lead to a U-turn downwards, down into the body. Because if you're so close to God, then you should be doing what he wants from you. This is an extremely profound statement. This is, in fact, a earth-shattering teaching that Rabbi Shneur Zalman here is revealing. This is something that every spiritual seeker needs to hear. That the true test of spiritual closeness, of divine closeness, of attaining a high level of enlightenment, the true test of it is, how will it affect your here and now? How will it make you better down here? Because if you want to go high, then you have to come low. If you want to get close to God, then you have to do what God wants from you, and that is to live a normal life down here of bringing goodness to the world. If somebody meditates day and night and reaches high levels of enlightenment, and that's all they do, that doesn't help them or anybody else. That's not what God sent us in this world to do. But if somebody meditates and that meditation leads them to become a more refined person, to do more acts of kindness, to make this world better, so then something's been achieved. If you think you're being close to God by being far away from people, so then that's not what God asked from you. That's not what God created you for. If you think you're getting closer to God by avoiding this world, that's not where God created you. He created you to be in this world. He sent you down here. And so the upward yearning, if it's true, will lead to a downward pull to come back into this world and to be involved in the world. And this is the most powerful spiritual message that we can hear. That where God wants you to be is down here. And any spiritual experience has to help that, has to facilitate that, has to make you a better person down here. This is what he means here, that teaching from Sefer Yetzirah, this Kabbalistic work. If you feel your heart rushing, return to the one. Meaning, you feel your heart rushing upwards. If you feel a spiritual yearning, it's at that point you have to return, come back down to what God wants, the one, what God wants from you, and that is to be down here in this world. That's what it means you live against your will. Your soul doesn't want to live. Your soul wants to be lost in God. But that's what you want. That's not what God wants. What God wants is for you to be down here. He sent your soul down here in a body, to inhabit the body and to battle with the body, to refine it, to be engaged in this physical world. And we do that through the Torah and its commandments. That's what makes a dwelling, a home for God down here in this world. That's His will, not what your soul wants. That's what God wants. And so with this idea, we've answered the original question we had. The very first statement from the Talmud that we quoted, against your will you live and against your will you die, is in the present tense. What this is saying is that this is the ideal state to be in at every moment of our life. Not just when we're born, but at every point of our life. That against your will you live means that to be a materialist being, to be somebody who just simply indulges in the physical world, a bodily person that only focuses on our body, that is a wasted life. Our soul is our true self, and our soul doesn't have an interest in materialism and physicality. It gets nothing out of it. We're not fulfilled. We can have all of the riches in the world. We can have everything we could possibly need and want and desire in the physical material world, and that will not give us 1 ounce of satisfaction, of meaning, of purpose. So to be alive in the physical world, our soul has no interest in the physical world. It gets nothing out of it. That's not what we're about. Our soul is about the divine, is about truth, is about that which is higher. So we're alive against our will. We don't want to be here, but against your will you die. You don't want to die either, because that's not fulfilling God's purpose. To leave this world, well, God didn't send you here to leave it. He sent you here to be here. And so at the very same moment, your soul doesn't want to be in the world for its own sake, for the sake of physicality, of materialism, but it doesn't want to die, it doesn't want to leave this world because it was sent here by God with a mission to make this world holy, to refine this world. Where does the soul get its fulfillment? In being in this world and above it at the same time. By being in the world, but not being caught up by the world. That we're in this world to make it better, but not to escape from it. And that's why the Jewish tradition is very much focused on life, on living, on being in the world, and on doing good in this world. All of the commandments of the Torah are about doing things in this world, with physical objects, with physical people, making this world good. Our focus is not about going to heaven, or reaching a higher reality. It's about this world becoming heaven, heavenly. Our mission of making the world good. So against your will you live, against your will you die is in the present tense, simultaneous. That you don't want to live, your soul doesn't want to just be in this world, but you don't want to die, the soul doesn't want to leave the world, because that's what God wants you to do, where God wants you to be. So it's the power of music that allows us to experience this balance in a very accessible way, because music takes us out of our current state. It transports us to somewhere higher, but good music will always bring us back down as well. It will have the question, but it will have the answer. It will lead us upwards, but then it will bring us back down to here. It's not an escapism to leave this world, but it's something to tune our souls, to awaken our souls to its yearning upwards and then coming back down. And so this is why in the Hasidic tradition, music was always so central to prayer, that the prayer was always accompanied with singing, because the singing, some of the songs will lift you up, some of them will bring you back down. The song of Rabbi Yisrael Taub of Modjitz, the song that he sang was one that allowed him to be above his body while he was experiencing an operation, but not to leave the body, not to leave it behind. Not to become a soul without a body, but not to be stuck in his body. And that's the power of Hasidic music. And this is the message that Rabbi Shneur Zalman wants to bring across in chapter 50, that our soul doesn't want to be here, but knows it has to be here. That it's against your will you live, and against your will you die. So in conclusion, true spirituality will lead you away from the body, because if you're in tune with the soul, the fire of the soul, that fire wants to jump upwards, away from the body. Like music that draws you out of yourself and into a higher state. That's what music does as well. It draws you to somewhere higher. But the divine will is that you live in this world and make it holy. So if it is God you seek, if the yearning is really to be close to God, you will find Him in the fulfillment of the mitzvah down here in this world, in the body, which is the music bringing you back down to dough, back down to where you began. Okay, any questions? Sorry? So I tried to find this nigun that he created, that Rabbi Yisrael Taub created. This song called Ezkara. And it's interesting that he would only sing the song at certain times. The final song that he created lasted half an hour. It's a half an hour composition. And his students and his disciples had a tradition that they would only sing the song on the anniversary of his passing, on his yahrzeit. They would get together and they would sing the song. No other time would they sing it. They didn't sing it at Yom Kippur, where the words were from, because it would take too long and it wouldn't be appropriate for the prayers. It was a song to be sung, but they would only sing it on the day of his passing. And they were very protective of this tune. They saw it as being very holy. They didn't want it to be used inappropriately or taken anywhere. Like they held guard of it. And so I was searching to find this song, to hear it. And there are no official recordings of it. It's never been produced. It's not on any albums or any CDs. It wasn't made available. It was only sung on his yahrzeit, on the anniversary of his passing. But then I did find that somebody did record a famous chazan, a famous cantor known as Rebbe Schenker, singing this tune on the yahrzeit, on the day of the yahrzeit. It's like an unofficial recording. You want to hear it? Okay, I'll play it on here because it won't be. It's a 20-minute tune, so I'm going to put it on, and as you leave, you're welcome to listen. Here are the words in English. Imagine him sitting on the bed, on the operating table. And we will continue next week, God willing, with the next chapter. Good evening.